A commentary that I hear from the right on a regular basis is that people on the left, or whoever they claim is on the left, want what is called an equality of outcomes. Equality of outcomes describes a state in which all people have approximately the same material wealth and income, or in which the general economic conditions of everyone's lives are alike. Now, the way that I see right-wing commentators argue against this is by framing equality of outcomes in a school group project scenario. In a school group project, different sections become the responsibility of individual members of the group. All group members work individually to produce something and combine it all in a completed project that has a single grade. As the concept goes, if they all work hard and produce high-quality results, then the grade they share will be higher. If someone falls behind, the poor quality of that area of the project will affect everyone's grade, which may be lower as a result. If the end result is a lower shared grade due to the inaction or actions of one person, this can feel unjust to those who worked extra hard on their section. Sometimes, even if the grade is high, those who worked harder or had better quality results may feel that those who didn't work as hard as them, didn't produce great results, or who just didn't work at all, shouldn't be entitled to the same grade as them because they didn't contribute equally to it. It essentially comes down to thinking that those who work harder and produce better results should be entitled to more rewards. And that's fine. It's okay to think that. I've thought that. Many of us who have suffered the grueling experience that is a group project, whether at school or even in the workplace, can attest to the injustice felt when someone isn't pulling their weight while you bust your ass. When you take the time to put in more effort or you achieve better results, you feel like you deserve more than those who you see as not working as hard as you or who didn't do as good of a job as you. If you work harder and accomplish something, you should reap the rewards that your labor produced. More spoils to those who work harder, who've acquired and honed their skills over time, and who produce higher quantities and better quality products is fine. Good, in fact. But there's a snag when applying this line of thinking to all things, especially when it is being used as an argument against something like equality of outcomes, which you'll notice isn't limited to group projects. So, firstly, define hard work. When looking at the amount of energy it would take for me, with my 2 functioning arms, to accomplish a task like stacking boxes, versus a person who only has 1 arm accomplishing the same task, who's working harder? Say that there's someone who was born with a genetic anomaly, maybe even an extra functioning arm or 2, an insect man with an evolutionary advantage that allows them to stack boxes faster than the average person with less energy expended. Even if the end result is the same amount of boxes stacked by each of us, as that was the goal presented to us, who worked harder? Because I would argue that the person with only 1 arm, who is doing compensatory actions and took the time to develop strategies in order to keep up with the same demand, is definitely working harder than I am. Meanwhile, Insect Man is evolutionarily advantaged, and so is spending way less energy on stacking the same amount of boxes. So did they work harder? Or did they just have an advantage that made it so they could produce just as many stacked boxes, but with much less effort? Let's go back to the group project. A group member who got a C on their section may have busted their ass off for that C. Meanwhile, you effortlessly managed an A because you're some sort of super genius who's also good at sex and talking. The B you got as a shared grade sticks in your mind as a lost opportunity, less than you deserve. But for them, it was a hard-earned victory. The boxes stacked by the person with 1 arm are still boxes stacked in addition to the ones stacked by myself and Insect Man. In the end, more got done with the 3 of us. If someone puts in the time and the effort to accomplish something, that time and effort, that labor, should be compensated, because it is their labor, their time, their finite existence on this earth that they are sacrificing that needs to be compensated for. If compensation is dependent on production, equalizing it based on total units provided by all who helped produce it takes into account how arbitrary the term hard work is, because the person with 1 arm still helped and they shouldn't get less just because of their limitations. But what about those with the ability but who shirk their responsibilities entirely, huh? What about those layabouts? Do they deserve compensation or the same grade? Well, here's the thing. First off, fuck those people. They're kind of assholes. It sucks when you have work to do and someone you have to rely on doesn't bother contributing whatsoever and your grade suffers for it or you end up overworked. It sucks. It really does. And a complete lack of contribution on a school project might be a case for grading that person separately. Hell, apply that to a worker co-op and that person should be let go. you're not lifting your weight, or rather lifting any weight, you should still get fired. But equality of outcomes doesn't just apply to isolated situations like a workplace or the classroom. It applies to the whole of society. And personally, I don't think even that level of dickishness warrants starvation or homelessness. And here's where we really get into that little snag I was referring to earlier. You see, in a classroom, the one who shirks responsibility or doesn't produce as great a section, regardless of the reasoning, their consequence, if grades were separate, would be a lower grade or a failing grade. In the workplace, lower wages, or getting sacked. But in today's fun-filled society of fiscal-based fuckery, if you can't or don't contribute enough to society, the consequence is you don't get what you need to live. If you're working hard, harder than those who produce more than you simply because you face more obstacles than others face, if you don't get to share that grade with those more capable than you, then the F you get stands for foodless. If you cannot produce as much as everyone else due to whatever combination of obstacles are in your way, if your contribution isn't weighed as equally to others who happen to produce more, the proportion of compensation likely won't be enough to sustain yourself. And this doesn't even touch on people who, for whatever reason, may it be disability, discrimination, or just a lack of opportunities, can't produce anything deemed valuable by society at all. It's that last part that is why the arguments fighting against equality of outcomes tend to discourage me, because between the lines of rhetoric, all I can see is a single message. They should just get a job and work harder. I worked hard, I got a job, why can't they? If you can't produce enough value for me, I don't care if you starve. Living is a privilege. That may not be what people think specifically when they're saying that, but the result is still the same. A little less than half of all homeless people have full-time jobs and are still homeless. Also, given how much hard work goes into sustaining yourself when you're homeless, they're definitely working hard as per these rules of requirement for deserving to live, but they aren't producing value, so fuck them. Quality of outcomes, a system in which there is a much more equal distribution of wealth, is the fairer system because it treats people as inherently valuable regardless of how much they can produce. And here's a fun little nugget I've been saving until the end. Are you ready? This is great. Check this out. Equality of outcomes doesn't mean a perfectly even distribution. Yeah, I probably could have led with that, but the right seems to argue that it's when a doctor and a fast food worker make the exact same wage, but in reality, quality of outcomes is about adjusting systems in order for people to not be left starving due to their differing positions in life. It means that both the doctor and the fast food worker are either compensated enough to afford or are simply provided enough food, water, and shelter to survive. The doctor will still probably have a nicer house, but both of them will have houses. This means that even in the equality of outcome scenario, people who produce more or who work harder are still compensated more. The disparity in compensation just isn't nearly as obscene. I'm going to close this out with my own vision of what I see when I refer to the term equality of outcomes. I see it as an equitable foundation for all. Whenever possible, essentials, necessities, needs, and basic requirements for survival shouldn't be charged for and should instead be provided through collective support. For example, water should be free. A soda, on the other hand, a luxury good that requires labor and time to create, and something with which the human body can go its whole existence without needing, need not be held to the same standard of accessibility as water. This could be achieved through socially owning necessities or by something like universal basic income. There would also have to be equal opportunity. Opportunities will always be discriminatory in nature in that they rarely, if ever, will be perfectly accessible to everyone. But an effort should be made to ensure that they are made available to all who have the skill set necessary to accomplish the tasks that the opportunity is presenting, and not denied on the basis of superficial things like race, gender, sexuality, etc. In all cases, the labor used to create and sustain something should not come at the cost of those who provide that labor, or at the cost of the rest of us either. You shouldn't be denied dignity or sustainability regardless of your role in society. A world under these circumstances imagines one where the least productive member of society still lives with dignity, and is not punished for lacking in utility or even lacking in motivation to be productive. Meanwhile, those who want for more aren't denied their ability to seek it out. They're simply given fair limitations on what can and can't be sacrificed in the pursuit of their ambitions. A world where the more you put in, the more you still receive, but one where those who can't put in enough aren't left behind for it. This has been A Pretentious Perspective.